Daniel Carter had never seen so many aliens in one place, and the sight made his stomach turn with nervous energy that he could not control. The Grand Convergence Hall stretched before him, like a cathedral made of starlight and crystal, with floating platforms and walkways that connected hundreds of tables arranged in patterns he could not understand. He was nobody important, just a junior aide carrying documents for Ambassador Linda Morrison, and his only job was to stay invisible and not cause any problems. Stay close, stay quiet, and do not touch anything, Ambassador Morrison had told him before they entered. Her voice, sharp with warning, Daniel had nodded and promised to be careful. But now he stood alone in the crowd because the ambassador had been pulled away for an urgent conversation with a delegation of four-armed beings. Covered in blue scales, the banquet was a celebration of peace, a gathering of over 50 species from across the galaxy. And Daniel felt smaller than he had ever felt in his entire life. Creatures of every shape and size moved around him, some floating, some crawling, some walking on legs that bent in directions that made his head hurt. He clutched his tablet against his chest and tried to find his assigned seat. But the symbols on the tables meant nothing to him, and every time he asked for help, the aliens simply stared at him like he was an insect that had wandered into their home. His feet ached from standing. His head pounded from the strange music that filled the air, and exhaustion pulled at his bones. After 18 hours without sleep, he spotted an empty seat at a table near the center of the hall, and the chair looked comfortable and the table was mostly empty. So he walked toward it with relief flooding through his tired body. The seat was marked with a crimson symbol that glowed faintly, but Daniel assumed it was just decoration. Just another alien marking that meant nothing to a human who could not read any of the languages here. He sat down with a heavy sigh and closed his eyes for just a moment. Letting the tension drain from his shoulders, the music stopped. Conversations died. The entire hall fell into a silence so complete that Daniel could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. He opened his eyes and found every alien in the room staring at him, their expressions ranging from shock to horror to something that looked terribly like pity. What did I do? He whispered to no one. A sound like thunder rolled through the hall, and Daniel turned to see a figure rising from a throne at the far end of the room. She was 7 feet tall, with skin the color of polished obsidian, 4 eyes that burned like dying stars, and armor that seemed to be alive, shifting and flowing across her body like liquid metals. She walked toward him with steps that shook the floor, and the crowd parted before her like waves fleeing from a coming storm. Daniel tried to stand, tried to run, tried to do anything, but his body refused to obey him. Frozen by a terror he had never known before, the creature stopped before him and looked down with all 4 of her eyes, and her face held no mercy, no warmth, nothing but cold calculation. "Do you know what you have done, little human?" she asked, and her voice was like blades scraping against stone. "I just needed to sit down," Daniel managed to say, his voice cracking with fear. "I did not mean any offense. I swear. You have sat in the seat of challenge," she said, and the words carried weight that crushed the air from his lungs. "You have invoked the right of Kelthar, a challenge that cannot be refused and cannot be withdrawn." Ambassador Morrison pushed through the crowd and grabbed Daniel's arm with desperate strength. "Your Majesty, please," she begged. "He is young and ignorant of your customs." This was clearly a mistake. Surely there must be some way to undo this. "There is no undoing what has been done," the alien queen replied. "The right is sacred law, older than your species, older than most stars in this galaxy." She reached down and gripped Daniel's shoulder with a clawed hand, and he felt the points of her talons pressing through his uniform. "I am Vailith Sorn, Princess Queen of the Drakevari Empire, ruler of 12 star systems and undefeated in 300 cycles of combat," she announced, and her voice echoed through the silent hall. by sitting in that seat. This human has bound himself to me by oath. Daniel's mind raced as he tried to understand what was happening. But nothing made sense. Nothing fit together in any way he could grasp. Bound how? He asked, and he hated how weak his voice sounded. Velis' lips pulled back to reveal rows of sharp teeth in what might have been a smile. "You are now my shadow guard," she said. "You will serve at my side until you prove yourself worthy of release, until you die in my service, or until you defeat me in single combat. I cannot fight you," Daniel said. "Look at me. I am just an aide. I carry documents. I do not even know how to hold a weapon properly." "Then you will learn," Velith replied. "Or you will die." Ambassador Morrison stepped forward with desperation in her eyes. "The human government will not accept this," she said. "This will cause a diplomatic incident that could destabilize the entire summit. Your government has no authority over Drakvari's sacred law," Velith said without even looking at her. The human accepted the challenge when he took the seat. His intentions do not matter, only his actions. She pulled Daniel to his feet with terrifying ease, lifting him like he weighed nothing at all. "You will come with me now," she commanded. "My ship departs within the hour. Please," Daniel said, searching her 4 eyes for any sign of compassion. "This was an accident. I did not know what that seat meant. I would never have sat there if I had known." Velith leaned close, and he could smell something like smoke and iron on her breath. "Accidents have consequences." "Little human," she whispered, "you belong to me now, and you will learn what that means." She turned and walked toward the exit, dragging Daniel with her. And the crowd watched in stunned silence as the deadliest queen in the known galaxy claimed her newest servant. Ambassador Morrison called after him, promising to find a way to fix this, promising to bring him home. But her voice faded as the distance grew. Daniel looked back one last time at the crimson seat that had destroyed his life, and he wondered how something so small could change everything so completely. Velith's grip tightened on his shoulder as they reached the doors. "Pray you are useful." "Little human," she said, "those who are not useful to me do not last long." The doors closed behind them, and Daniel Carter began his journey into a world of warriors, honor, and blood that he had never imagined existed. The Drakvari flagship was called the Throne of Embers, and it was the largest vessel Daniel had ever seen. Stretching across the void like a mountain made of black metal and red light, he stood in his assigned quarters, a small room with a hard bed and bare walls. And he tried to understand how his life had fallen apart so quickly just 2 days ago. He had been excited about his first diplomatic mission, dreaming about the stories he would tell his family when he returned home. Now he was a prisoner bound by alien law to a queen who could kill him with a single blow. A chime sounded at his door, and before he could respond, it slid open to reveal Commander Ryketh. The Drakvari second-in-command Ryketh was nearly as tall as Velith, with scarred gray skin and 3 eyes instead of 4. And he looked at Daniel with open contempt. "The queen has ordered you to attend her," Ryketh said. "Follow me and do not speak unless spoken to." Daniel followed the commander through corridors filled with Drakvari warriors, and every single one of them stopped to stare at the human walking among them. He heard whispers in their harsh language, and though he could not understand the words, the mocking tone needed no translation. They entered a training hall where dozens of Drakvari sparred with weapons that hummed with deadly energy. And at the center of it all stood Velith, watching her soldiers with those 4 burning eyes. "The human shadow guard," she announced without turning around. "Tell me, little one, have you ever fought for your life before?" "No, Your Majesty," Daniel admitted. "I have never been in a real fight." Velith turned to face him, and her expression was unreadable. "That will change today," she said. "Ryketh, test him." The commander smiled with cruel pleasure as he stepped into the sparring circle and gestured for Daniel to join him. "Wait," Daniel said. "I do not have a weapon, and I do not know your fighting styles. How is this fair?" "Fair?" Ryketh laughed, and the sound was harsh and cold. "Shadow guards earn their place through blood and pain, not fairness." He struck without warning, his fist crashing into Daniel's chest and sending him flying across the floor. Daniel gasped for air as agony exploded through his ribs. But he forced himself to stand again. Ryketh hit him once more. Then again, each blow harder than the last, and each time Daniel fell. He pushed himself back to his feet. The Drakvari warriors stopped their own training to watch, their eyes wide with something that might have been surprise. "Stay down." "Human," Ryketh growled after the fifth blow. "You have proven nothing except your stupidity." Daniel spat blood onto the floor and raised his fists in a guard position he had learned from watching fighting videos as a teenager. "I am not finished yet," he said. Through swollen lips, Ryketh beat him down twice more. And twice more Daniel rose, his body screaming with pain but his will refusing to break finally. Ryketh stepped back and looked at Valeth with confusion in his three eyes. "He will not stay down," he said. "I do not understand this creature." Valeth walked toward Daniel, her footsteps echoing in the now silent hall. "Why do you keep rising?" she asked. "You cannot win. You must know this. So why continue?" Daniel looked up at her through eyes that were already swelling shut. "My father taught me something when I was young," he said, his voice rough with pain. "He said that standing up matters more than winning. That the measure of a person is not how many times they fall, but how many times they refuse to stop getting back up." Valeth studied him for a long moment, and something flickered in her eyes that he could not identify. "Take him to the medical bay," she ordered. "And when he is healed, give him access to the ship's library. Let him learn our history and our law." Ryketh looked like he wanted to argue, but a single glance from his queen silenced him. Daniel spent the next 3 days in the medical bay, his body wrapped in healing devices that knitted his bones and sealed his wounds with technology far beyond anything Earth possessed. When he was finally released, he went straight to the library, determined to find a way out of his situation. The Drakvari database was vast, containing thousands of years of history, law, and tradition. And Daniel read until his eyes burned and his head throbbed. Learned that the Drakvari were a warrior species who valued honor above all else. That their entire civilization was built on codes of combat and sacred oaths. He learned that the Rite of Kelthar had been created 10,000 years ago as a way for commoners to challenge nobility, and that the seat he had taken was meant for those brave enough to risk everything for power or glory. He also learned that the last shadow guard to complete the rite and earn their freedom had done so 200 years ago. The method was simple, but nearly impossible. Save the monarch's life in battle. Daniel leaned back in his chair and let this information sink into his exhausted mind. He was bound to a queen who could not be defeated, surrounded by warriors who saw him as an insect, and his only hope for freedom required him to somehow save the life of the deadliest fighter in 12 star systems. "You are still awake," a voice said, and Daniel jumped as Valeth emerged from the shadows of the library. "I could not sleep." "Your Majesty," he said, "I have been trying to understand your people." Valeth sat in the chair across from him, and up close she seemed almost curious rather than threatening. "What have you learned?" she asked. "That your people value strength and honor, that weakness is death and mercy is rare, that I am in a situation that has no easy escape." Daniel answered honestly. Valeth nodded slowly. "Most shadow guards spend their first weeks begging for release or trying to escape," she said. "You are the first in my reign to spend that time learning. Escape seemed pointless." Daniel admitted, "I do not know where I am. I cannot fly a ship, and even if I could run, I gave my word when I sat in that seat, even if I did not know what I was doing. You believe your word matters, even when it was given by accident. Valeth asked. A promise is a promise, Daniel said. My mother taught me that. She said that if you break your word, even once, then your word means nothing ever again. Valeth was quiet for a long time, and when she finally spoke, her voice was softer than he had ever heard it. You are strange. Little human, she said. Your species is young and weak and soft. Yet you speak of honor as if you understand it. Maybe honor is not about strength, Daniel suggested. Maybe it is about choosing to do the right thing even when it is hard. Especially when it is hard. Valeth stood and looked down at him with something that might have been respect. Rest now, she commanded. Tomorrow your training begins in earnest, and you will need all your strength to survive what comes next. She left him alone in the library, and Daniel stared at the door long after she had gone. He did not know if he could survive this, did not know if he would ever see Earth again. But he knew one thing for certain. He would not give up. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. His father's voice echoed in his memory. And Daniel Carter made a promise to himself that he would keep standing up no matter how many times he fell. The alarm tore through the ship like a scream. Red lights flashing in every corridor as the throne of embers changed course toward a distress signal from a Drakvari colony world. Daniel had been training with the other warriors when the call came, and he watched as the entire crew transformed from soldiers into a war machine, moving with perfect coordination. All combat personnel report to stations. The announcement declared, "The Vela swarm has breached our borders." Daniel grabbed a nearby warrior's arm as the alien rushed past. What is the Vela swarm? He asked. The warrior looked at him with something close to fear in his eyes. They are the devourers, he said. A hive mind that consumes everything in its path. They do not negotiate, do not stop, do not feel. They only hunger. Commander Reicheth appeared and pointed at Daniel with a clawed finger. You stay on the ship, he ordered. This is real combat, not training, and you would only get in the way. Daniel wanted to argue, but he knew Reicheth was right. So he nodded and headed toward the observation deck to watch the battle unfold. The colony world appeared on the screens. A green and blue planet now covered in patches of black that spread like disease across the surface. Thousands of Veleth creatures swarmed through the atmosphere, each one a nightmare of claws and teeth and hunger. And they moved as one mind with one terrible purpose. Eveleth led the attack personally, her shuttle descending into the chaos while Daniel watched from the safety of the ship. For hours the battle raged, and Daniel could do nothing but stare at the screens and feel useless and small. Then the Veleth hit the ship. The impact threw Daniel across the observation deck as a swarm of the creatures breached the hull, tearing through metal like it was paper. Alarms screamed as Drakvari crew members rushed to defend against the invasion. But the Veleth were everywhere, pouring through the breach in numbers that seemed endless. Daniel scrambled to his feet and ran toward the sound of fighting, his heart pounding with terror, but his feet carrying him forward anyway. Found a group of wounded Drakvari trapped in a corridor, cut off from the rest of the crew by a wall of Veleth drones. The creatures turned toward him with eyeless faces, sensing new prey, and Daniel knew he had a choice to make. He could run and probably survive, or he could fight and probably die. He thought of his father, thought of standing up, thought of the promise he had made to himself. Daniel grabbed a broken metal pipe from the damaged wall and charged at the Veleth with a scream that surprised even him. He was not strong enough to kill them, not fast enough to avoid their claws, but he was determined enough to keep them focused on him while the wounded crew escaped. The Veleth slashed his arm, his leg, his back, painting the corridor with his blood. But Daniel kept swinging, kept fighting, kept standing. Reinforcements arrived just as his vision began to fade. Drakvari warriors cutting through the swarm and securing the Corridoricus was among them, and he stared at Daniel with shock written across his scarred face. The human held them along. One of the wounded warriors said, "He gave us time to call for help. He saved our lives." Daniel barely heard the words as his legs finally gave out and he collapsed against the wall. Far below on the planet's surface, Valeth was fighting her own battle. She had become separated from her guard when the Veleth ambushed their position. And now she faced 100 of the creatures alone. She was the greatest warrior in the Empire, undefeated in 300 cycles. But even she could not fight forever. Her armor was cracked, her energy fading. And the Veleth kept coming in waves that never ended. Then a shuttle screamed down from the sky and crashed directly into the center of the swarm. The explosion scattered the creatures and broke their coordination, giving Valeth the opening she needed to cut her way free. She looked at the burning wreckage and saw a figure pulling himself from the twisted metal. Covered in blood and burns, but still moving, Daniel had stolen the shuttle against every order he had been given, had flown it despite barely knowing how, had crashed it into certain death because he saw his queen in danger. He collapsed 10 feet from the wreckage. His body finally reaching its absolute limit, Valeth cut down the remaining Veleth around her and walked to where Daniel lay broken on the alien soil. She knelt beside him and looked at his ruined body, at the wounds that covered every inch of him, at the human who had risked everything for someone who had taken away his freedom. "Why?" she asked, and her voice held emotion that surprised her. Daniel opened his eyes. "Barely conscious, barely alive. You were in danger," he whispered. "I could help, so I helped. That is what shadow guards do." Valeth lifted him in her arms as gently as she had ever held anything, and she carried him back to the landing zone where reinforcements were arriving. The Drakvari soldiers stared as their queen, the deadliest warrior in known space, carried a broken human like he was precious treasure. "Get the medical team," she commanded. "This human will not die today. I forbid it." The medics worked for hours to save Daniel's life, and Valeth did not leave his side for any of it. When he finally woke 3 days later, she was still there, sitting in a chair beside his bed with her 4 eyes fixed on his face. "You disobeyed my orders," she said. "Yes, Your Majesty," Daniel admitted. "I'm sorry. You stole a shuttle and crashed it into a swarm of Veleth." "Yes, Your Majesty. You merely died saving my life." Daniel was quiet for a moment, searching for words. "You would have died if I did not," he finally said. "I could not let that happen." Valeth leaned forward, and there was something new in her expression, something that looked almost like wonder. "Your debt is not yet paid," she said softly, "but you have earned the right to stand beside me, not behind me." The door opened and Ryketh entered, his 3 eyes finding Daniel immediately. Commander walked to the bed and did something that made Daniel's heart stop. Ryketh knelt and bowed his head. "Brother in shadow," he said, "you have earned my respect and my loyalty. The Drakvari will never forget what you did." Daniel looked from Ryketh to Valeth, unable to believe what was happening. "I was just doing what anyone would do," he said. "No," Valeth replied. "You were doing what only a human would do. You were doing the impossible and refusing to accept that it could not be done." She placed her clawed hand over his bandaged one. "Rest now, Daniel Carter," she commanded. "You have much healing ahead of you, and the Empire has much to learn about the strange species called humanity." The Drakvari homeworld was called Kelthos Prime, and it burned red beneath 3 suns that painted the sky in colors Daniel had never imagined. He stood beside Valeth as their shuttle descended toward the capital city, a massive sprawl of black towers and crimson banners that stretched to the horizon. "The Festival of Crimson Moons happens once every 50 cycles, Valeth explained. "Every noble house in the Empire will attend, and they will all want to see the human who saved their queen." Daniel shifted uncomfortably in the formal armor he had been given. Black metal etched with red symbols that marked him as a shadow guard of the royal house. "They will not be happy about me," he said. "No," Valeth agreed. "Many of them think humans are weak creatures unworthy of standing near the throne. They will try to shame you, insult you, perhaps even challenge you. What should I do if they challenge me?" Valeth looked at him with something that might have been concern. "Survive?" she said simply. The festival was overwhelming. Thousands of Drakvari nobles gathered in a palace that made every human building look like a child's toy. Daniel walked 3 steps behind Valith as protocol demanded, and he felt the weight of countless hostile stares pressing against him. Whispers followed him everywhere. Words in the Drakvari language that he now understood after months of study. The human pet. They called him the Queen's embarrassment, the weakling shadow. He kept his face calm and his head high, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing him affected. The real trouble came on the second night of the festival. Young Drakvari nobles stepped into Daniel's path as he walked through the great hall, blocking his way with deliberate aggression. "I am Lord Mevin," the noble announced loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. Cousin to the Queen and heir to House Vycroth. Daniel stopped and studied the noble carefully, noting the cruel amusement in his 4 eyes. "I know who you are, Lord Mevin," Daniel replied. "Your reputation precedes you." Mevin's lips curled into a sneer. "And your reputation disgusts me," he said. "A human wearing the armor of a shadow guard. It is an insult to every warrior who earned that honor through blood and skill. I have bled more than most in this room," Daniel said calmly. "The scars on my body prove that I have earned my place." The crowd gathered around them, sensing the coming confrontation. "Scars can be bought," Mevin said. "True worth must be proven in single combat." He threw a gauntlet at Daniel's feet, and the sound of metal hitting stone echoed through the suddenly silent hall. "I challenge you," Mevin declared. "Fight me in the arena tomorrow, or admit that you are the coward everyone knows you to be." Daniel looked at the gauntlet, then at Valeth across the hall, and he saw the warning in her eyes. Refusing the challenge would shame her, would prove every insult the nobles had whispered since he arrived. He picked up the gauntlet. "I accept," he said. "Tomorrow I will meet you in the arena." Mevin laughed with cruel delight. "Prepare your funeral rites." "Human," he said, "I will make your death last for hours." That night, Valeth came to Daniel's quarters with anger burning in her eyes. "You should not have accepted," she said. "Mevin is one of the finest duelists in the Empire. He has killed 40 opponents in the arena. You cannot defeat him." "I could not refuse," Daniel replied. "You know that as well as I do." Valeth was silent for a long moment. "There is something wrong about this challenge," she finally said. "Mevin has never cared about honor or tradition. He does nothing without a purpose, and I cannot see what he gains from killing you." Daniel nodded slowly, the same suspicion forming in his own mind. "Then I will have to survive long enough to find out," he said. The arena was packed with every noble in the Empire, all of them eager to watch the human die. Daniel stood in the center of the sand-covered floor and faced Mevin across 30 feet of open space. The noble was armed with twin blades that hummed with deadly energy, while Daniel held only a single sword that felt clumsy in his inexperienced hands. "Any last words, human?" Mevin called out. Daniel raised his sword and took a deep breath. "Just one," he replied. "Begin." Mevin attacked with speed that blurred, his blades cutting through the air in patterns designed to slice Daniel apart. Daniel blocked, dodged, and retreated, using every trick he had learned in months of training just to stay alive. The crowd cheered as Mevin drew first blood. A slash across Daniel's arm that burned like fire. Then more cuts came, each one calculated to cause pain without killing. And Daniel realized that Mevin was enjoying this. savoring his suffering like a fine wine. But Daniel was learning two humans had evolved as persistent predators. Creatures who survived by watching, waiting, and learning the patterns of their prey. Maven was fast and skilled, but he was also arrogant, and his arrogance made him predictable. After 20 minutes of brutal combat, Daniel saw the opening he needed. Maven lunged with his right blade in a killing strike. Confident that Daniel was too exhausted to react, Daniel sidestepped at the last moment and brought his sword up in a move that disarmed Maven's right hand. Before the noble could recover, Daniel pressed his blade against Maven's throat. The arena fell silent. "Yield," Daniel said, his voice steady despite the pain flooding through his wounded body. Maven's eyes burned with hatred and disbelief. "You cannot do this," he hissed. "You are nothing. You are human." "Yield," Daniel repeated. "I have beaten you. I do not need to kill you." Maven spat at Daniel's feet, but he dropped his remaining blade. "I yield," he growled. The crowd erupted in chaos. Some cheering, some shouting in outrage, and Daniel lowered his sword and stepped back. That night, Daniel was reviewing records in his quarters when he found something that made his blood run cold. Messages between Maven and an unknown contact. Encrypted, but not well enough to hide from someone who knew human hacking techniques. The messages revealed a plot to assassinate Lilith during the final ceremony of the festival. A conspiracy involving a dozen noble houses and weapons. Smuggled into the palace, Daniel ran through the corridors until he found Lilith's chambers. "You need to see this," he gasped. Maven was a distraction. "They are going to kill you tomorrow." Lilith read the messages, and her eyes blazed with fury. "Gather Ryketh and the royal guard," she commanded. "Tonight we hunt traitors." The conspiracy was broken before dawn. The assassins captured, and the noble houses exposed. Maven was executed for treason as Daniel watched from Lilith's side. "You spared his life in the arena," Lilith said afterward. "Most Drekvari would have killed him. I did not need to kill him to beat him," Daniel replied. "Taking a life should never be done when there is another choice." Lilith looked at him with an expression he had never seen before. "Why did you spare him?" she asked. "He would have made you suffer. He would have shown no mercy." Daniel thought about the question carefully before answering. "Because killing him was not necessary," he said. "Only stopping him was. I could not know he was a traitor. So I judged him only for what happened in the arena. And in the arena, he was just a defeated opponent, not a criminal." Lilith was quiet for a long time. "You are teaching me things I never expected to learn," she finally said. "Things about mercy and choice and the difference between strength and cruelty." She placed her hand on his shoulder, and the touch was gentle instead of commanding. "You have changed everything, Daniel Carter," she said, "and I am not sure yet if that terrifies me or fascinates me." 6 months had passed since Daniel Carter sat in the wrong seat and changed his life forever. And now the throne of embers hung in orbit above Earth like a promise and a question. Daniel stood at the observation window and stared at the blue and green world below. The home he had not seen since that fateful night at the Banquet. Ambassador Morrison's face appeared on the communication screen, and she was smiling with relief and triumph. "We did it, Daniel," she said. 6 months of negotiations. But we finally reached an agreement with the Drekvari Empire. You are free to come home." Daniel felt his heart clench with emotions he could not name. "Thank you, Ambassador," he said. "I know this was not easy. You held on longer than anyone expected," Morrison replied. "Earth is proud of you. Your family is waiting. Everything you left behind is ready to welcome you back." The communication ended, and Daniel continued to stare in his homeworld. He thought about his parents, his friends, the small apartment he had rented near the embassy where this whole journey began. He thought about coffee in the morning and rain on windows and the sound of traffic on familiar streets. Then he thought. About Valitha, a chime announced her arrival. And Daniel turned to face the queen who had taken him from everything he knew. She stood in the doorway, her 4 eyes unreadable, her posture rigid with something that might have been tension. "You have been summoned to the throne room," she said. "There are matters of law that must be resolved before you depart." Daniel nodded and followed her through corridors he now knew as well as any place on Earth. The Drakvari crew saluted him as he passed, their faces showing respect that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. Gorikith fell into step beside him and gripped his shoulder. "Whatever happens today," the commander said quietly, "you will always be brother to me. Never forget that." "I will not forget." Daniel promised. The throne room was vast and empty, except for Valith, who took her place on the crimson throne and looked down at Daniel standing below her. "Daniel Carter of Earth," she said formally, "you came to my service through the right of Kelthar, bound by ancient law and sacred oath." "Yes, Your Majesty," Daniel replied. "In your time as Shadow Guard, you have endured trials that would break warriors with decades of training. You have fought beside my soldiers and bled for my empire. You have saved my life not once but twice." She paused, and Daniel saw something flicker in her eyes. "By the law of the right, you have fulfilled every requirement for release. Your oath is completed. Your debt is paid." Daniel bowed his head. "I am honored to have served." "Your Majesty." Valith rose from her throne and descended the steps until she stood before him. "But the right offers 2 endings," she said, and her voice was softer now, less formal, more uncertain. "You can leave with your freedom and the eternal honor of the Drakvari people." She hesitated for just a moment. "Or you can claim the original prize of the challenge, my hand and a place as my consort king." Daniel's breath caught in his throat. "Your Majesty, I never intended to challenge for your hand," he said. "I sat in that seat by accident. I was tired and confused and did not know what I was doing." "I know," Valith said, "but the law does not care about intentions, only actions. And your actions have earned you the right to choose." She looked at him with all 4 of her eyes, and for the first time since he had known her, she seemed vulnerable. "I will not command you to stay," she continued. "That would dishonor everything you have taught me about choice and mercy and the difference between power and control." She took his hand in her clawed grip, gentle as she had never been before. "But I am asking you, Daniel Carter, as a queen who has never asked for anything in her life, to consider what you would be leaving behind." Daniel looked at their joined hands, at the contrast between her obsidian skin and his pale flesh, at the way their fingers fit together despite every reason they should not. "You are asking me to give up my home," he said quietly. "My family, my world, everything I have ever known." "Yes," Valith admitted. "I am asking you to choose me over all of that. And I know it is not fair, and I know I have no right to ask. But I am asking anyway." She met his eyes with a vulnerability that stripped away every layer of the warrior queen. "In 200 years of rule, no one has ever made me feel less alone," she said. "No one has ever challenged me or taught me or made me question the beliefs I was raised to hold. You have changed me, Daniel, and I do not want to go back to who I was before." Daniel thought about Earth waiting below. He thought about everything he would lose if he stayed. Then he thought about the last 6 months, about standing up when every instinct told him to stay down, about learning to survive in a world that saw him as weak, about finding strength he never knew he had. He thought about Valith watching over him while he healed, about her hand on his shoulder after the duel, about the way she looked at him when she thought he was not paying attention. He took her other hand in his. "I sat in that seat by accident," he said. "But every day since then, every choice I made to stand beside you, to fight for you, to believe in you, those were not accidents." He looked up at her face and saw hope dawning in her 4 eyes. "I chose to stay every single day of the last 6 months," he continued. I chose to learn your ways and respect your people and find my place in your world, and I'm choosing now. Not because of law or duty or obligation. He squeezed her hands. I am choosing you, he said. I am choosing us. I am choosing the life we could build together over the life I left behind. Valith made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob or something between the two. You are certain? She asked. Earth is your home. Your family is waiting. You could go back to everything you were before. I do not want to be who I was before, Daniel replied. That person was a scared aide who carried documents and dreamed small dreams. I am more than that now. You helped me become more than that. And I will not leave the person who showed me what I could be. Valith pulled him close, and her arms wrapped around him with a tenderness that would have shocked anyone who knew her only as the deadliest queen in known space. Then, let us show the galaxy what happens when two worlds become one, she whispered. Announcement went out that same day, and the galaxy watched in stunned disbelief as the Drikvari Empire and Earth declared an alliance built on the foundation of a human consort and an alien queen. The wedding was broadcast across 1,000 worlds, and diplomats who had expected war found themselves planning trade agreements instead. Daniel Carter stood beside Valith Sorn before the thrones of the Empire, wearing the crown of a consort king and holding the hand of a woman he had grown to love against every expectation. You know this will not be easy, Valith said quietly as the ceremony ended. There will be enemies, challenges, those who think a human has no place beside a Drikvari queen. Then we will face them together, Daniel replied. Just like we faced the Velith and the conspiracy, and everything else that has tried to tear us apart. He smiled up at her. I have gotten very good standing back up, he said, and now I will never have to do it alone. The final ceremony was an address to the Galactic Council, broadcast to every corner of known Space-Fi Lith, and Daniel stood together before the assembled representatives of 100 worlds. And they spoke of alliance, of cooperation, of a future where strength was measured not in weapons, but in bonds of trust and friendship. The galaxy watched as the deadliest queen in known space held hands with a human who had stumbled into her life by accident and refused to leave. And in the closing moments of the broadcast, as the screen faded to black, Daniel Carter thought about the journey that had brought him here. He'd never planned to change the galaxy, but then again, he had never planned to sit in that seat either.